Alien girls never seen a male. Ripped clothes off human soldier, the twin sons of Zephyria were beginning to dip below the jagged horizon, casting long shadows over the violet sands. A light wind carried the scent of strange minerals and a hint of the nearby spore fields, painting the alien landscape with a strange, otherworldly beauty. On a ridge overlooking a vast valley, a human soldier crouched, scanning the terrain with his binoculars. His name was Lieutenant Marcus Hale, a scout of the Interstellar Exploration Corps, and he had been sent to Zephyria to chart the planet and gather intelligence about the indigenous species reported to live here. Marcus had been trained for situations like this, though nothing had fully prepared him for the first glimpse of the Zephyrian natives. The scouts' reports had mentioned a humanoid species with vibrant skin tones and highly adaptive intelligence, but what Marcus saw exceeded any description. A group of figures moved with uncanny grace among the spore fields, their limbs long and agile, their skin shimmering faintly under the sun's dying light. Marcus adjusted his binoculars, squinting to see details. They were small in stature compared to humans, perhaps about 4 feet tall, and had elongated heads that tilted curiously as they explored their surroundings. Their eyes were large, dark, and gleaming, reflecting both light and intelligence. Marcus felt a thrill of anticipation mixed with caution. This was first contact, and he knew the importance of observing without disturbing. The figures seemed unaware of him at first. They were examining strange, crystalline plants, touching and probing with delicate fingers that glowed faintly at the tips. The energy reading device Marcus carried indicated a moderate level of bioactivity in the group. Curious, cautious, intelligent, he muttered under his breath. He noted everything in his log, careful not to make any sudden movements that could startle them. Suddenly, one of the Zephyrians paused and looked directly toward him. Its large eyes reflected both surprise and curiosity, and it tilted its head in a way that was almost human. Marcus froze, realizing that he had been spotted. He slowly lowered the binoculars and raised his hand slightly to show no threat. The Zephyrian seemed to consider him for a moment, then chirped a soft sound. It was musical, almost like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. Marcus's communicator crackled softly, and he whispered to the command center back on the orbiting station. "This is Hale. I've located the primary group. They are humanoid, small, and highly alert, observing from a distance. No hostility observed so far. Do not attempt direct contact unless necessary." Yet he moved carefully, a trained scout in enemy territory, though he reminded himself these beings were not enemies. The Zephyrian stopped near a cluster of large, crystalline formations that glimmered with soft internal light. Marcus watched in fascination as they began to interact with the crystals. One of the figures raised a hand, and the crystal responded, pulsing with light and emitting soft, melodic tones. Marcus realized these beings had some form of natural interaction with their environment, almost as if they could communicate with it. He scribbled notes rapidly. Highly attuned to environmental energy, possibly sentient communication through resonance, advanced sensory perception. His mind raced with the implications. If the humans could establish a peaceful relationship with the Zephyrians, the potential for learning about their technology, culture, and the planet itself was immense. Just as he was recording the data, a sudden movement caught his eye. A smaller Zephyrian, perhaps a juvenile, had wandered too close to a spore pit. The soft ground gave way beneath its feet and it began to sink. Without thinking, Marcus sprang forward. He grabbed a nearby branch and extended it toward the struggling juvenile. The Zephyrian paused, looking at him with wide eyes. For a moment there was hesitation. Then, in a surprising display of trust, it reached for the branch and Marcus pulled it free. The rest of the group immediately froze and turned toward him. The adult Zephyrians approached cautiously, their heads tilted in unison, assessing the human. Marcus stayed low, hands visible and calm, showing that his only intention was to help. One of the larger Zephyrians came closer, its movements fluid and careful. It reached out a hand, brushing lightly against the juvenile's back in reassurance, then looked at Marcus. The gesture was subtle, yet Marcus understood its meaning: recognition, curiosity, cautious acceptance. Marcus lowered himself further and spoke softly. "I mean no harm. My name is Marcus. I'm a friend." He wasn't sure they understood, but the tone of his voice mattered. The group didn't scatter. Instead, they observed him, their large eyes following every movement, and Marcus felt an unexpected connection. Hours passed in this quiet exchange. The Zephyrians began to demonstrate their own curiosities. One of them tapped gently on Marcus's shoulder pad and then pointed toward the crystalline formations. Marcus realized they wanted him to see something. He followed their gestures carefully and watched as the crystals emitted a more complex series of tones, almost like music. Marcus instinctively held out his hand, and the nearest Zephyrian lightly touched his palm. A pulse of warmth spread through him, accompanied by a soft vibration in the crystals themselves. Marcus's mind raced. These beings had a deep, intrinsic connection to their planet and its energy. They were not only intelligent but symbiotic with their environment in a way humans could only dream of. He wondered how humanity could learn from them without disturbing the delicate balance they had maintained for generations. As night fell, the twin moons rose in the sky, casting silvery light across the valley. Marcus set up a temporary observation camp, maintaining a safe distance while keeping the Zephyrians in view. They had returned to their clusters, still aware of him but not threatened. Marcus felt a mixture of awe and responsibility. This was a historic moment, the first peaceful interaction between humans and Zephyrians. How this encounter would shape the future of interstellar diplomacy depended on the patience and respect he showed. Sleep was impossible. Marcus remained alert, watching as the Zephyrians seemed to perform a quiet ritual around the glowing crystals. There was no sound he could detect, only the soft light and the subtle vibrations through the ground. He noted the patterns and movements carefully, realizing that these behaviors might hold cultural significance. By the time the first light of dawn touched the horizon, Marcus had filled multiple data pads with observations, sketches, and hypotheses. He knew that when he reported back, scientists and diplomats would study these findings for years. The Zephyrians, for their part, continued their morning routines as if the human observer was simply part of the landscape, a silent, non-threatening presence. Marcus allowed himself a small smile. The first contact had gone better than anyone could have hoped. Not because he had imposed human ways upon them, but because he had approached with respect, patience, and curiosity. For the first time, he understood the essence of HFY. Humans could succeed, not just through strength or technology, but through empathy, intelligence, and the ability to adapt to the unknown. The day ahead promised new discoveries, but Marcus knew the foundation had been laid. A mutual recognition that, despite differences, understanding was possible. And in that moment, on the violet sands of Zephyria, humanity had taken its first step into a larger, more wondrous universe. The morning sun rose over Zephyria, spilling golden light across the violet sands and crystalline spires. Lieutenant Marcus Hale had spent the night under the rocky overhang, observing the Zephyrians from a safe distance. Today promised more than just observation. Today was the day he would learn what made these beings so uniquely attuned to their world. As the Zephyrians emerged from the spore fields, Marcus noticed a subtle change in their behavior. They no longer glanced nervously at him. Instead, they moved with an almost playful curiosity, occasionally stopping to point or gesture toward him. Marcus lowered his binoculars and watched closely. The juvenile he had saved yesterday approached first, stepping lightly across the sand toward him. Its large eyes gleamed with cautious interest. Marcus crouched low, keeping his movements slow and deliberate. "Good morning," he said softly, though he doubted the Zephyrians understood the words. The juvenile tapped its hand lightly on the ground and then pointed toward a ridge overlooking a shallow canyon. The message was clear. It wanted him to follow. Marcus nodded and began moving carefully, ensuring not to startle the group. As he approached, more Zephyrians joined, forming a loose, flowing line ahead of him. They moved with grace, effortlessly navigating the uneven terrain and spore pits. Marcus had to be careful to keep pace, yet he felt a thrill in matching their agility. The ridge offered a breathtaking view of the canyon below. Strange crystal formations jutted from the walls, catching the sunlight and scattering rainbows across the landscape. Marcus realized that this canyon was not merely a geographic feature. It was a living environment, resonating with energy that the Zephyrians seemed to understand instinctively. One of the adult Zephyrians stepped forward and made a series of gestures, pointing to the crystals while touching the air as if conducting music. Marcus observed and tried to mimic the movements. To his surprise, the crystals responded to his presence. A gentle pulse of light traveled along their edges, accompanied by a soft harmonic tone. The Zephyrian's eyes widened in what Marcus interpreted as delight. He scribbled notes rapidly, excitement building. Interaction with environmental energy, responsive to movement, communication through resonance, extraordinary sensory perception. He realized the Zephyrians' connection to their world was far beyond anything humans had developed. They did not merely survive, they thrived in harmony with their environment, shaping and understanding it simultaneously. As the morning passed, Marcus experimented cautiously, moving his hands and body in ways the Zephyrians had demonstrated. Each motion elicited a response from the crystals, a sequence of lights and sounds that formed an intricate pattern. The Zephyrians observed his efforts with keen interest, occasionally guiding him by gently tapping or redirecting his movements. Marcus marveled at their patience. They had not mocked or recoiled at his clumsy attempts. Instead, they treated him as a student, willing to teach without words. By mid-morning, Marcus had learned to elicit simple sequences from the crystals. The Zephyrians responded with a series of chirps and melodic sounds that seemed to express approval. The juvenile from yesterday even ventured to touch his hand again, this time tapping lightly on his wrist, and then pointing toward a narrow passage leading deeper into the canyon. Marcus understood immediately that they wanted him to explore further. He glanced at the adults who nodded, or at least gave gestures that he interpreted as encouragement. With careful steps, he followed the group into the passage. The air grew cooler, tinged with the scent of minerals and faint ozone. Bioluminescent fungi dotted the walls, casting a soft glow that illuminated the path ahead. As they progressed, Marcus noticed a small, clear pool of water at the base of the canyon. The Zephyrians paused and gestured toward it. When he approached, he saw that the water was unlike anything he had seen before. Tiny motes of energy danced across its surface, responding to movement with a subtle shimmer. Marcus reached out a hand and gently disturbed the water. A ripple of light traveled across the pool, and the Zephyrians reacted with soft, musical tones that resonated through the canyon. He realized that the water, like the crystals, was another medium of communication and connection. It was a living element of the environment, sensitive to touch, motion, and presence. The Zephyrians had evolved to understand it completely, using it as a tool, a medium, and perhaps even a form of expression. Marcus spent hours interacting with the pool, guided by the Zephyrians. He learned to create patterns of light and sound, discovering that subtle movements produce the most intricate responses. The Zephyrians responded with enthusiasm, circling around him, their large eyes reflecting pride and joy. Marcus felt a deep sense of connection, not only with the alien beings but with the planet itself. As the afternoon approached, the Zephyrians led Marcus deeper into the canyon. The walls rose high above them, covered in crystalline vines that hummed faintly in response to their touch. Marcus followed their gestures, carefully avoiding the fragile structures while observing their patterns. Each interaction was a lesson in patience, observation, and respect for the environment. Eventually, They reached a cavern where the crystals glowed brighter than anywhere else he had seen. The Zephyrians gathered around a central formation, performing a series of movements that seemed ritualistic yet harmonious. Marcus watched intently, sensing that this was a place of significance. He mimicked their gestures cautiously, and the crystals responded, sending waves of light and sound that filled the cavern. The Zephyrians emitted a series of melodic tones, almost like applause, and Marcus realized that he had successfully participated in their ritual. It was not merely mimicry. It was an exchange, a bridge of understanding between two species. Marcus felt a surge of pride, not as a conqueror, but as a student and collaborator in this extraordinary first contact. Hours passed, and Marcus grew more attuned to the Zephyrians' ways. He learned that their gestures, tones, and interactions were a complex language of movement and resonance. Words were unnecessary. Communication occurred through understanding, observation, and shared experience. Marcus marveled at the efficiency and depth of this form of interaction. As the twin suns began to set, casting long shadows across the canyon floor, Marcus realized that he had been given a rare gift: insight into a species that had evolved not just for survival, but for harmony with its environment. The Zephyrians, in turn, had accepted him as a participant, demonstrating trust and curiosity that transcended the barriers of language and culture. Marcus took a deep breath and reflected on the day's experiences. This was what HFY truly meant: not dominating, not imposing, but excelling through empathy, intelligence, and the willingness to learn. Humanity had the capacity to understand, adapt, and collaborate with beings far different from themselves, and this first contact on Zephyria was proof of that potential. As night fell and the Zephyrians retreated to their resting clusters, Marcus set up a small observation post at the edge of the canyon. He recorded every detail: the interactions with the crystals, the water, the gestures, and the tones. Each note was precious, a key to unlocking the understanding of this remarkable species. He knew that tomorrow would bring new discoveries. Perhaps he would learn more about their culture, their technology, or even the secrets of the planet itself. But tonight, he allowed himself a moment of quiet satisfaction. He had not only survived first contact, he had participated, learned, and formed a fragile but meaningful connection with beings unlike any other in the galaxy. In the glow of the bioluminescent fungi, Marcus felt a profound sense of purpose. Humanity's future among the stars depended not only on weapons or technology, but on understanding, curiosity, and respect for life in all its forms. And here, on this alien world, he had glimpsed what was possible when humans embraced those ideals. The stars above Zephyria shimmered like diamonds against the dark velvet sky, twin moons reflecting light on the crystalline canyon walls. Marcus gazed up, imagining the countless worlds humanity had yet to encounter, the infinite species yet to meet, and the endless possibilities of collaboration and discovery. For now, he was content to watch, to observe, and to learn. Tomorrow, the journey would continue, but the foundation had been laid. A bridge between humans and Zephyrians, built not on force, but on mutual curiosity, respect, and the extraordinary ability of humans to rise to challenges not through dominance, but through intelligence and heart. The morning light broke over Zephyria, painting the crystalline canyon in hues of silver and lavender. Lieutenant Marcus Hale rose from his observation post, stretching his stiff muscles. The night had been quiet, but his mind raced with the events of the previous day. He had begun to understand the Zephyrians' ways, their connection with the crystals, the pools of shimmering water, and the gentle rhythms of their communication. But today promised a new challenge. As Marcus packed his equipment, the Zephyrians appeared at the edge of the canyon. The juvenile he had saved yesterday darted ahead, chirping a soft, melodic sound that seemed to signal the start of the day's activities. The adults followed, moving with the same grace and curiosity as before. Marcus fell in step behind them, careful to match their pace, his eyes scanning the terrain for any dangers. The group led him to a narrow passage on the canyon floor, one he had not explored before. The walls rose steeply on either side, covered in glowing crystalline vines that pulsed softly with energy. Marcus noticed that the Zephyrians paused frequently, touching certain vines and tilting their heads as if listening to the vibrations. He observed and copied their movements, curious to see what lessons this canyon held. Suddenly, the ground beneath him trembled lightly. Marcus froze, heart racing. The Zephyrians stiffened as well, their eyes widening. A low, rumbling vibration spread through the canyon floor. Marcus instinctively dropped to one knee, scanning for the source. A cluster of large, jagged crystals farther ahead began to shake violently, shards of light scattering across the walls. A loud crack echoed through the canyon as one of the crystalline formations split, sending a small landslide toward the group. Marcus acted without hesitation, grabbing a fallen branch and using it to steady the juvenile Zephyrian beside him. He pulled it back just as the rocks tumbled past. The adults reacted swiftly, forming a protective semicircle around the juvenile and Marcus, their movements precise and coordinated. Marcus realized that while the Zephyrians were attuned to the canyon's energy, this sudden instability was unexpected. He quickly scanned the area for safe passage. The canyon walls were steep, and the spore fields below were uneven and unpredictable. His training as a scout kicked in. "Follow my lead," he whispered, though the Zephyrians seemed to understand his intent through gestures and body language alone. He led them toward a narrow ledge above the canyon floor, careful to step only on stable ground. The Zephyrians followed, their trust in him evident as they navigated the treacherous path. The vibration of the ground persisted, and Marcus knew that time was critical. He could not afford to make a mistake, not when the Zephyrians' safety depended on him. As they reached a safer area, the tremors intensified, and Marcus realized that a larger section of the canyon was shifting. The Zephyrians emitted a series of melodic tones, their bodies vibrating in harmony with the canyon's energy. Marcus instinctively adjusted his stance, matching their rhythm as best he could. The vibrations calmed slightly, indicating that the Zephyrians' actions were having an effect. Marcus felt a surge of admiration. These beings were not only intelligent but highly skilled in working with their environment. Their connection with the planet was profound, and their ability to influence it, even subtly, was astonishing. He took careful notes in his data pad, documenting every movement, tone, and response. Humanity could learn so much from them, not just about survival but about harmony with nature. After several tense minutes, the tremors subsided. The canyon was stable once more, and Marcus exhaled in relief. The Zephyrians relaxed, their melodic tones softening into a series of gentle chirps. The juvenile approached him again, tapping his wrist lightly in a gesture of gratitude. Marcus smiled and patted its hand, feeling a deep connection forming between them. The group continued deeper into the canyon, now more cautious but also more confident. Marcus noticed that the crystals along the walls were more intricate here, forming natural patterns that glowed brighter than anywhere he had seen before. The Zephyrians gestured toward these formations, indicating that he should study them carefully. He knelt beside one of the crystals, running his fingers lightly across its surface. The crystal responded with a series of harmonic vibrations, and Marcus realized that it was capable of storing and transmitting energy in a unique way. The Zephyrians emitted approving tones, guiding his movements to unlock subtle patterns within the crystal. Hours passed as Marcus and the Zephyrians explored the cavern together. He learned to interpret their tones and gestures, and they responded to his cautious mimicry with increasing enthusiasm. Each interaction deepened his understanding of their culture and their environment. He realized that the Zephyrians' intelligence was not just biological, it was ecological. They thought in terms of systems, connections, and balance, rather than individual gain or competition. By late afternoon, Marcus and the Zephyrians reached a vast underground chamber. The ceiling was adorned with hanging crystals that glowed like stars, reflecting light across the chamber in dazzling patterns. In the center was a pool of water larger than any he had seen before, its surface shimmering with energy that seemed almost alive. The Zephyrians gathered around the pool, performing a series of movements that Marcus recognized as a ritual similar to the one from the previous day. He observed carefully, noting the synchronization between the crystals, the water, and the Zephyrians' gestures. Then, with subtle guidance, he joined in. His movements caused the crystals above to pulse and the water to ripple with a soft glow. The Zephyrians emitted a harmonious series of tones, as if welcoming him fully into their circle. As the ritual continued, Marcus noticed a pattern emerging in the energy of the chamber. The crystals and water were interconnected, forming a network that responded to movement, sound, and intention. Marcus realized that this was a form of communication, not just among the Zephyrians but with the environment itself. By participating, he was learning to speak their language through action and perception. Suddenly, the pool began to shimmer more intensely, sending waves of energy that caused the crystals to vibrate. The Zephyrians paused, their large eyes reflecting a mix of curiosity and concern. Marcus instinctively stepped closer, trying to understand the cause. The energy pulses were unlike anything he had encountered. They were not dangerous, but they demanded careful attention and coordination. Marcus extended his hands toward the water, moving slowly in patterns that mirrored the Zephyrians' gestures. The pulses responded, calming gradually. The Zephyrians emitted approving tones, circling around him in a protective and collaborative formation. Marcus felt exhilarated. He was not only surviving in this alien environment but actively participating in it. Hours passed as they experimented with the energy of the chamber. Marcus discovered that small, deliberate movements could create complex responses, and that the Zephyrians' guidance allowed him to navigate the environment safely. He marveled at their intelligence, their patience, and their ability to teach without words. By the time the twin moons rose above Zephyria, casting silver light across the chamber, Marcus knew that he had experienced something extraordinary. He had learned not only about the Zephyrians' abilities, but also about the potential of humans to adapt, understand, and collaborate with species far beyond their own. As they left the chamber and returned to the canyon floor, Marcus felt a deep sense of purpose. He had proven, both to himself and to the Zephyrians, that humans could rise to challenges through observation, intelligence, and respect. HFY was not about domination. It was about the ability to thrive in harmony, to learn, and to contribute meaningfully to the universe around them. That night, Marcus set up a small camp near the canyon's edge. He reviewed his notes, sketching the crystal patterns, the pool, and the gestures of the Zephyrians. He felt a quiet satisfaction, knowing that humanity's first peaceful engagement with an alien species was unfolding successfully. Outside his tent, the Zephyrians moved gracefully among the spore fields, their melodic tones blending with the wind. Marcus watched them, feeling a profound sense of connection. He realized that this was just the beginning. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, deeper understanding, and perhaps insights into the mysteries of Zephyria that had eluded even the most advanced human explorers. For now, he allowed himself to rest, knowing that the bonds he had begun to form today would shape the future of human exploration. Humanity could face the unknown not with fear, but with curiosity, courage, and the ability to learn from the incredible diversity of life across the stars. And on Zephyria, under the twin moons and the glowing crystals, Marcus Hale felt the first true sense of partnership between humans and an alien species, a partnership built on trust, understanding, and the extraordinary potential of intelligence, empathy, and adaptability. The next morning, Zephyria awoke in a gentle hush. Twin suns rose over the horizon, casting golden and violet light across the crystalline canyon. Lieutenant Marcus Hale stirred from his small camp, muscles aching slightly from yesterday's explorations, but his mind alive with anticipation. The Zephyrians had already begun to move, their graceful forms flitting between the crystal spires and spore fields. Today promised something new. As Marcus gathered his equipment, the juvenile Zephyrian he had befriended yesterday approached him, tapping his shoulder with a delicate, glimmering hand. Its large, luminous eyes fixed on his gaze, conveying urgency. Marcus immediately understood. They had discovered something unusual deeper in the canyon. The group moved swiftly, led by the adults, who emitted melodic tones that resonated through the canyon. Marcus followed closely, adjusting his steps carefully over the uneven terrain. The canyon was alive with energy, every crystal, vine, and pool responding subtly to the Zephyrian's presence. Marcus felt a thrill of excitement. He had never been in such a responsive, dynamic environment. They reached a narrow gorge, where the walls rose steeply on either side. Marcus noticed immediately that the ground was shaking more violently than before, and faint cracks appeared in the crystalline formations. The Zephyrians paused, their gestures cautious, scanning the surroundings. Marcus instinctively crouched low, aware that this was no ordinary tremor. A loud, rumbling sound echoed through the gorge, followed by a sudden collapse of a section of the canyon wall further ahead. Rocks and crystal fragments tumbled toward them, and Marcus reacted instantly. He grabbed the juvenile and pulled it to safety behind a larger rock formation. The adults formed a protective semicircle, their bodies moving with incredible speed and precision, shielding the smaller members from falling debris. Marcus's heart pounded. This was unlike anything he had faced before. The Zephyrians' familiarity with the canyon did not eliminate danger entirely, and their reliance on subtle environmental cues meant that Marcus had to pay attention to every sound, vibration, and movement. He felt the pressure of responsibility. He was the only human here, and one mistake could endanger not just himself but the group that had begun to trust him. The tremors subsided briefly, giving Marcus a chance to scan the area. The canyon was littered with debris, blocking the path they had intended to take. The Zephyrians chirped softly, emitting a series of tones that Marcus interpreted as both concern and strategy. He realized that to continue, they would have to find another route, one that required both intelligence and caution. Marcus pointed toward a narrower ledge higher on the canyon wall, hoping the group would understand. The Zephyrians tilted their heads and moved closer to investigate. He demonstrated the path carefully, stepping lightly along a small ridge and using hand gestures to indicate safety. After a moment, the adults nodded, and the group began to follow him, moving with a combination of trust and agility. As they progressed, Marcus noticed that the crystals along the walls were vibrating with unusual intensity. The Zephyrians touched them gently, their melodic tones rising and falling in response. Marcus realized that the crystals were acting as both sensors and communicators, signaling potential instability further ahead. He adjusted his pace, observing the patterns and learning to anticipate danger before it occurred. The group reached a narrow bridge of naturally fused crystals spanning a small chasm. Marcus tested its strength carefully with his boots, noting subtle shifts in vibration. The Zephyrians paused, communicating in tones that he now partially understood: caution, balance, cooperation. Taking a deep breath, he led the way, moving deliberately to maintain stability. The adults followed, guiding the juveniles with gentle touches and careful timing. Halfway across the bridge, a section of crystal cracked beneath Marcus's foot. He froze for a split second, heart racing, and then shifted his weight, distributing pressure more evenly. The bridge held, and the group continued, each step a careful dance between human intuition and Zephyrian guidance. Marcus marveled at their skill. These beings had evolved to navigate dangers he could barely comprehend, yet they also trusted him to make the right decisions. Once across, they descended into a wider section of the canyon. The ground was more stable, but the tremors had caused new hazards: fallen crystals, unstable rocks, and shifting pools of water. Marcus paused to catch his breath and observe the Zephyrians. They moved with remarkable synchronization, each action deliberate, every individual aware of the other's movements. It was a lesson in cooperation and adaptation, and Marcus absorbed it fully, striving to match their pace and precision. They arrived at a large underground cavern, its ceiling lined with luminous crystals that cast soft, multicolored light across the walls. In the center of the chamber was a pool of water larger and more active than any Marcus had seen. Ripples danced across its surface, responding to the tremors and the energy from the crystals. The Zephyrians gathered at the edge, performing a series of intricate movements that seemed to stabilize the vibrations temporarily. Marcus watched closely and mimicked their gestures. Slowly, deliberately, he moved his hands in patterns that echoed the Zephyrians' motions. The pool responded with calmer ripples, and the crystal's vibrations softened. Marcus felt a surge of pride. He was not only surviving this alien environment but actively contributing to its stability. The Zephyrians' melodic tones rose in approval, a sound that resonated through his very chest. As he continued, Marcus noticed faint tunnels branching off from the cavern. The Zephyrians gestured toward one of them, indicating that he should follow. He moved cautiously, aware that the underground network could hide further dangers. The passage twisted and turned, lined with crystalline walls that hummed softly. Energy flowed through the corridor like a river, responding to their movements and presence. Suddenly, a section of the tunnel collapsed ahead of them. Marcus reacted instantly, signaling the group to stop. Rocks tumbled and shards of crystal bounced harmlessly off the walls, but the path was blocked. The Zephyrians paused, communicating with tones that Marcus now partially understood: analysis, assessment, and strategy. He realized that they needed to find an alternative route, one that required problem-solving and teamwork. Marcus scanned the cavern walls and spotted a narrow ledge leading upward. It was risky, but it offered a potential escape from the blocked tunnel. He demonstrated the route carefully, showing how to navigate the ledge safely. The adults considered his movements, then nodded, signaling approval. With the juveniles safely guided, they began the ascent, each step a careful balance of trust, observation, and coordination. As they climbed, Marcus felt a profound sense of connection with the Zephyrians. They were not merely creatures to observe. They were partners, collaborators, and teachers. Their guidance, patience, and intelligence inspired him to rise to challenges he had never imagined. Humanity, he realized, could flourish not through force but through understanding, adaptability, and cooperation with the unknown. After a tense climb, they reached the top of the ledge, emerging into a wide chamber filled with glowing crystals and pools of shimmering water. The tremors had subsided, and the environment seemed to stabilize in response to their presence. The Zephyrians emitted a series of tones that Marcus interpreted as relief and celebration. He smiled, feeling a deep sense of accomplishment. He knelt beside one of the pools, observing its reactions to small, deliberate movements. The Zephyrians gathered around him, chirping in patterns that suggested encouragement and shared achievement. Marcus moved his hands carefully, creating ripples and light patterns that harmonized with the crystal's energy. The Zephyrians responded with melodic tones, their bodies vibrating in sync with the environment. Hours passed as Marcus continued to explore the chamber, learning more about the Zephyrians' abilities and the planet's energy. He realized that their connection with Zephyria was not merely instinctual. It was cultural, learned, and refined over generations. They had developed an intelligence that blended perception, movement, and understanding in ways humans could only aspire to emulate. As the twin moons rose over the horizon, casting silver light across the cavern, Marcus felt a profound sense of purpose. He had faced unexpected dangers, navigated treacherous terrain, and contributed to the safety and stability of the Zephyrians' environment. Humanity's first contact with an alien species was not merely surviving, it was participating, learning, and thriving in partnership. That night, Marcus set up a small observation post near the chamber's entrance. He reviewed his notes, sketching crystal patterns, energy flows, and Zephyrian gestures. Each observation was a testament to human adaptability, intelligence, and curiosity. Outside, the Zephyrians moved gracefully among the spore fields, their melodic tones blending with the soft wind. Marcus watched them, feeling a sense of connection and optimism for the future of interstellar cooperation. Humanity, he realized, had the potential to excel not through domination, but through understanding, empathy, and the willingness to learn from other forms of life. On Zephyria, under the twin moons and the glowing crystals, Marcus Hale had witnessed the first true partnership between species, a collaboration built on intelligence, courage, and mutual respect. And as he drifted into a brief, exhausted sleep, he knew that tomorrow would bring new discoveries, deeper connections, and challenges that would test both human ingenuity and the extraordinary abilities of the Zephyrians. Together, they were forging a path into a universe full of unknown wonders, and Marcus was determined to rise to the occasion. The twin sons of Zephyria had barely risen when Lieutenant Marcus Hale stirred from his rest, already alert. The previous days had been a whirlwind of discovery, learning, and unexpected challenges. Marcus now understood the Zephyrians' unique bond with their environment and had earned their trust. Today, however, felt different. The Zephyrians were unusually active, their melodic tones carrying a sense of urgency that Marcus could feel in his chest. He quickly packed his equipment and joined the group. The adults gestured toward a distant ridge, their movements fast but precise. The juvenile he had befriended darted ahead, chirping in a sequence Marcus had come to recognize as warning or alert. His instincts told him that something significant was happening, and he had to be ready for anything. As they approached the ridge, Marcus noticed that the ground vibrated more intensely than he had ever felt before. Crystals along the canyon walls shimmered violently, sending scattered light across the terrain. He immediately recognized this as a large-scale energy disturbance. The Zephyrians paused, touching the crystals and moving in synchronized patterns, attempting to stabilize the flow. Marcus realized that whatever was happening required their combined effort, and now, his help. He stepped forward cautiously, mimicking their gestures as best as he could. The crystals responded, though not as strongly as the Zephyrians had hoped. Marcus quickly adjusted, observing the energy pulses and responding with deliberate movements. The adults circled him, guiding him silently, their melodic tones rising in intensity. Suddenly, a massive tremor shook the ridge. Rocks and crystals fell from above, and a small landslide threatened to block their path. Marcus reacted instinctively, pulling the juvenile to safety and signaling the group to spread out. The Zephyrians moved with incredible coordination, shielding the young and guiding Marcus through safe passages. Once the immediate danger passed, Marcus took a moment to assess the situation. The ridge itself was unstable, and the source of the disturbance seemed to be deeper within the canyon. The Zephyrians chirped rapidly among themselves, their tones conveying concern and strategy. Marcus nodded, understanding that they wanted him to accompany them into the heart of the canyon to help stabilize the energy flow. They descended carefully, the path winding through jagged crystals and spore fields that quivered with each tremor. Marcus noticed that some of the larger crystal formations were beginning to fracture. He realized that if the energy was not controlled, the canyon could collapse, endangering the Zephyrians and himself. His mind raced. He needed to act and fast. The Zephyrians led him to a vast chamber at the base of the canyon. In its center was a massive crystal formation, pulsating with chaotic energy. The surrounding crystals and water pools seemed to amplify the pulses, creating a resonance that threatened to destabilize the entire chamber. Marcus could feel the vibrations through his boots, the rhythm erratic and dangerous. He glanced at the Zephyrians. Their large eyes reflected urgency but also trust. They had brought him here because they believed he could help. Marcus took a deep breath, recalling everything he had learned: the patterns of crystal resonance, the response of water to energy, and the subtle communication through gesture and tone. He knew that to succeed, he would need to combine human ingenuity with the Zephyrians' intimate knowledge of their environment. Marcus stepped forward, extending his hands toward the central crystal. He moved slowly, deliberately, matching the rhythm of the surrounding formations. The Zephyrians circled him, their melodic tones harmonizing with his movements. The chaotic pulses of energy began to respond, softening slightly as he adjusted the patterns of motion. Hours passed in a tense balance of observation and action. Marcus learned to anticipate the crystal responses, shifting his gestures in synchronization with the Zephyrians' guidance. Slowly, the chaotic energy began to stabilize. The central crystal pulsed steadily, the surrounding formations resonating in harmony. Marcus could feel the relief in the Zephyrians' tones, a signal that their combined efforts were succeeding. Suddenly, a section of the chamber wall cracked, sending a shower of crystal shards toward them. Marcus reacted instantly, using his body to shield the juvenile and signaling the adults to shift position. The Zephyrians moved with precision, creating a protective barrier with their bodies and gestures. The shards fell harmlessly around them, and the chamber remained intact. Marcus exhaled, realizing that teamwork, human and alien, had prevented disaster. Once the immediate danger passed, Marcus focused on the final step, fully harmonizing the energy flow. He studied the patterns carefully, observing how each movement and tone affected the crystals and water. The Zephyrians chirped and vibrated in encouragement, guiding him through intricate sequences. Marcus moved with confidence now, blending human problem-solving skills with the Zephyrians' environmental mastery. As the twin suns rose higher in the sky, the chamber reached a state of perfect resonance. Light and energy pulsed rhythmically, the crystals shimmering in a synchronized dance. The water pools rippled gently, reflecting the golden sunlight. Marcus felt a wave of exhilaration. He had succeeded, not alone, but as part of a collaboration that transcended species. The Zephyrians emitted a prolonged, harmonious series of tones, a melody that Marcus had come to understand as both celebration and gratitude. The juvenile approached him, tapping his hand lightly, and Marcus returned the gesture with a smile. In that moment, he realized that the bond they had formed went beyond mere observation or survival. It was trust, understanding, and mutual respect. With the energy stabilized, the group emerged from the chamber, the canyon around them quiet and peaceful for the first time in days. Marcus looked out over the landscape, noting how the light caught the crystals and how the spore fields shimmered in harmony. The Zephyrians moved with ease now, their confidence restored by their collective effort. Marcus felt pride not in conquest or dominance, but in cooperation, adaptability, and the human capacity to learn and contribute meaningfully. As the day continued, Marcus and the Zephyrians explored new areas of the canyon, observing and interacting with the environment. They discovered additional crystal formations, pools of energy-rich water, and subtle patterns in the spore fields. Marcus carefully documented everything, realizing that the knowledge gained here could transform humanity's understanding of ecology, energy, and intelligent life. In the late afternoon, the group returned to a high ridge overlooking the canyon. Marcus paused to reflect on everything that had happened. He had faced tremors, landslides, and chaotic energy flows. He had learned to communicate without words, to read subtle environmental cues, and to harmonize human skill with alien intelligence. Humanity's first contact with the Zephyrians had not only been peaceful, it had been productive, transformative, and deeply meaningful. The Zephyrians gathered around him, their melodic tones rising and falling in a pattern Marcus now understood as ceremonial gratitude. The adults circled the juvenile, who tapped Marcus lightly on the shoulder. It was a simple gesture, but it carried profound significance: acknowledgement, friendship, and mutual respect. Marcus returned the gesture, feeling a surge of connection and purpose. As evening fell, the twin moons rose over Zephyria, casting silver light across the canyon. Marcus set up a small observation post, reviewing his notes and sketches. Every crystal formation, every water pool, every Zephyrian gesture had been recorded, a testament to the lessons he had learned. He understood now that human success was not measured solely by strength or technology, but by intelligence, adaptability, and the ability to cooperate with other life forms. That night, as Marcus gazed at the stars above Zephyria, he felt a deep sense of accomplishment. Humanity had taken its first step into a larger universe, not as conquerors, but as learners, collaborators, and partners. The Zephyrians, with their intelligence, patience, and harmonious connection to their environment, had shown him a path forward, one of understanding, mutual respect, and extraordinary potential. Marcus drifted to sleep under the twin moons, confident that tomorrow would bring new discoveries and new opportunities to learn. Humanity's journey among the stars had begun in earnest, guided by curiosity, courage, and the ability to rise to challenges with intelligence and heart. On Zephyria, amidst the glowing crystals and shimmering waters, humans and Zephyrians had forged a bond that would endure, a bond built on collaboration, respect, and the timeless drive to explore, understand, and flourish.